Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. In this show, together with our guests, we explore different ways in which we can develop a meaningful relationship with our bodies and minds and respond to the current state of the culture in a quest for more integrated and embodied perspectives. Hello and welcome to Material for the Brain podcast. A quick reminder that our open day is coming up very soon, 13th of June. If you live in Vienna or its vicinity and would like to directly experience our approach to dance, movement and embodiment, you're very welcome to join us again, 13th of June. Okay, my guest for today is Christian Felber, an internationally renowned speaker, contemporary dancer, and author of several economics bestsellers. This is Not Economy, Change Everything, Creating an Economy for the Common Good, Trading for Goods, and Money, The New Rules of the Game, which was awarded the Get Abstract International Book Award in 2014. The Economy for the Common Good received the Zeitwissen Award in 2017 and made it to the Spiegel bestseller list in 2021. Felber is also the initiator of the Economy for the Common Good and the Cooperative for the Common Good. He was born in Salzburg in 1972 and studied Spanish, psychology, sociology, and political sciences in Madrid and Vienna, where he currently lives. I met Christian in the context of the CI community in Vienna and then later became aware of his work, and after reading his book Change Everything, the wish to invite him to the podcast became very clear. In our conversation, we talked about his perspective about the boundaries of the term economy and what we should consider under this term. We explored the boundaries of the term universal human needs and their relation to the current economical order, and we looked at his alternative economical principles. We talked about the connection between economy and the preservation of a culture. We talked about human behavior and whether violence is rooted in socialization or nature. We talked about how to govern violence from an individual perspective, scaling up to relation between states. We addressed coordination problems. We talked about discourse culture post-COVID and whether polarisation is on the rise, and much more. I hope you will enjoy the conversation, and I invite you to leave your comments, questions, and join me to the conversation online. And now I bring you Christian Felber. Hello, dear Christian. How are you?
Hi, Matan. I'm fine. Just coming from swimming.
Nice. Welcome to my podcast. It's been, I think it's been in the making in my mind for kind of two and a half years. I wanted to have you already here. Like I think around COVID, I got your book, one of your books, and it immediately made me the wish to invite you to this format, and I'm happy that finally it is taking place. So how are you? Where do I catch you right now? You just said you came from swimming.
Exactly, from the Danube. I like to start my day with some swim routine, with yoga and tree climbing and being a bit in nature. So I'm quite balanced,
Nice.
Well prepared.
Yeah, actually I see you quite often there in the Alte Donau.
Yo.
It's a sweet spot.
Whenever it's possible, I go there.
Cool, great. And what are you doing right now in life? Like what are you busy with in the current moment?
Many things. I'm preparing a scientific conference in the north of Holland in 2 weeks about future fit economic models. I'm at the same time building the international movement of the economy for the common good, which is one of these future fit economic models. And I'm writing a book on the pandemic and fundamental rights. So I'm not bored at the moment.
Okay, and do you have also some time for dancing?
Yes, of course. Just this weekend, I've been teaching partnering, contemporary partnering, and also yoga at the Contact into Paradise Jam, which was a four days flow in the community with 100 dancers. It was a great time off and recreation in our bodies and socializing as contact dancers.
Nice, beautiful. So maybe if you can take me a little bit, because I personally it's something that I also don't know, so I would be happy to hear a little bit to, I don't know, your upbringing and what brought you to do what you do, this combination between writing, talking about economy, society, dancing. How did it all ended up in this moment?
Yes, it's a pleasure, yeah. Maybe I start with introducing myself as a holistic being, interbeing with other beings. Holistic being means that I don't identify with I think, therefore I am. The famous saying of René Descartes. I also feel and I also sense and therefore I am, and I maintain relationships with others. I love and therefore I am, and I'm connected to nature and the greater universe, and therefore I am as well, and in the end we are. And this is a holistic approach towards life, and that's why just studying at university or just thinking about things was never sufficient, was never satisfying. I kind of from the beginning started with thinking and sensing at the same time. And this is the way I came to first ecological topics and ecological problems, because I felt connected to Mother Earth and I felt connected to ecosystems, and I dived deep into these problems and the causes of these problems. And this is the way I came finally to the economy, although I did not study economics. But I was worried about the state of the planet and also the state of society, of course. In the end, I did study some of these disciplines like psychology, sociology, and political science. But it was always from a holistic motivation and a holistic view on everything. And then only a final outcome of all of that was the vision of a different economy as one of the systemic tools to a better society.
And how did dancing merge into that?
Well, that's a very personal pathway. I started with rather hardcore sports like soccer, but then I saw that many of my colleagues got injured and were many times fighting against each other. That was not making me feel comfortable. That's why I shifted to athletics, which was also a very hard body experience, but with less injuries on your own.
Competing against yourself, you mean?
Exactly. Yeah. In the worst case, I remember the most pleasurable sprint in my lifetime. It was me alone in a state. Because then I could really enjoy this exercise, this movement. That's why I left competitions and I shifted to dance in the end, because I was searching for a more collaborative, creative, playful, kind of relaxed kind of movement. And so in my early 20s only, I came over to dance. That was one origin of my encounter with dance, and the other one I made very early the experience when I went directly from sleeping in my bed to the desk and start working. I tended to become depressive, but I luckily recognized that first things should come first. First basic needs should be met first, and that's the way I one day found that I first have to do something for my body to feel balanced, and only then I'm a very efficient and productive thinker, writer, intellectual worker. That was the second.
And what was the first encounter within the world of dance? Was it directly contemporary dance or contact improvisation? Because I met you, I think, in both of these scenes, also in the Contact Festival in Austria. I think it was the first time, maybe, and also in Tanzquartier. So what led the way into the dance?
Yeah, it was a broader search.
So from the beginning.
From the beginning, in my early 20s, I went to diverse dance studios, and I did from modern to Afro to yoga to bio dancer, and until I came on a training that was a 2 years training that was called New Dance, And this new dance training or course included, next to a lot of contemporary techniques, it also included body-mind centering, was one central pillar, and contact improvisation. That was, let's say, 25 years ago. But I got hooked with contact improvisation immediately. And only then I started to train in Tanzquartier, from the beginning, because Tanzquartier was the subsequent institution of, I now don't remember the previous one, was a collaborative, collective training of professionals.
Okay.
And then Tanzquartier was founded, and I started there from the beginning.
Okay. Oh, beautiful. And when it comes to kind of dance and movement, do you also see yourself? Do you also look at that word to this holistic perspective, or do you have anything specific that you kind of really dedicate yourself within that universe, or you still enjoy doing many different things, or certain things kind of filtered out naturally with your taste, or?
If I get you right, I would say that everything starts with the body, in my own perception. So if I was asked, who am I would say I'm first and foremost a living body, a mindful body that is also thinking, writing, speaking, talking. But the correct order of things, or the coherent order of things, is first dwelling in my body and noticing my basic needs, and only from there I choose a profession or I participate in public life.
Okay. No, my question was like much more specific about within the practice of dance and movement. Are there any things that you have particular interest right now? Because again, I met you within this larger thing called the contact scene, and I wonder if it's still something that you consider kind of a main practice, or do you still have this very, let's say, more multidisciplinary approach of doing many things, which are of course connected, but still, there is a very different culture between doing Afro dancing and doing body-mind centering. So
now I got you.
Yeah. Sorry, no problem.
Yeah. There is a strong inclination to contemporary techniques, from Rasmus Oellme to Ultima Weth, sequences and choreographies. But I never found the time to dedicate full time to contemporary dance techniques and to apply in dance companies. So I did not turn this passion into a professional dancer's career, which I'm completely fine with, because I would never like to dance 8 hours a day. This is not my thing. But it is possible to dance every once in a while, or just 1 hour a day, with contact improvisation. This is a true passion. Partnering as a choreographed subform of contemporary dance. Also acro yoga and acrobatics. These are my, let's say, 4 main passions, and they allow to just dedicate occasionally or on weekends, or within a more complex life.
Yeah, it's, when you said in the beginning that you started to notice many people who are engaged in sport are getting injured, and then kind of led you to eventually to end up in dance, my first thought was like, oh my God, dancers are getting injured all the time. And I think that but I think that what is interesting is that I think that dance has the potential to, in a measured way, to be very, very healthy. And I think that maybe one of the problems, and maybe it will also relate to the way we think about economics and this thing, is this hyper specialization that is happening within the field of dance. And then, of course, if you dance 8 hours a day and you dedicate yourself for like very specific aesthetics, so then of course the body will cannot hold forever. Response, yeah, that's a nice way to phrase it. Cool. So let's start diving into your way of thinking about economy and in this greater context. And I will just say that I read your book, Change Everything. But I know it's been written quite some years ago, and I wondered first if you could kind of introduce a bit this thesis, but also
if it doesn't represent fully where you're right now, to maybe also kind of update a little bit me from what I read into where are you right now in that, and we will start to take it from there. Sounds okay?
Sure, very okay. Yeah, well, as said, I'm not an economist by academic formation, but I think about the economy as I'm thinking about everything. I'm not specialized in anything. I'm a holistic thinker, as said. And if I look at ecological problems like 35 years ago, the destruction of Amazonian rainforests, I come naturally and automatically to the economic causes of these ecological and social and political and cultural conflicts and problems. And through this holistic journey, I detected the economy as one of the main sources of many of the facets of the current polycrisis. And that's why I'm dedicating to investigate and think about the economy and political economy and economic science and education, because I want to contribute to the solution of these many problems, of these many facets of the polycrisis. And from this relaxed distance, if you want so, I think I'm in a better condition to detect blind spots and systemic misconstructions of our idea of the economy. And I can think very freshly from the beginning, what should the economy actually be about? Even earlier, what is the economy? What do we consider as economy? Are these just market activities, or is it, for instance, the satisfaction of basic needs? And if it's about the satisfaction of basic, not all of our desires, but our basic needs, and if it's about that, then the economy is taking place everywhere, starting in households, starting with mother-child relationships, in commons, in neighborhoods, in public services and public goods, and also in markets, but neither necessarily in markets nor exclusively in markets.
Can we take a pause, because you've been mentioning the word basic needs? Could you outline what you mean by that? Is that kind of related to this paradigm of needs that we have, like food, shelter, or like, do we have any specific way of looking at this?
Of course, psychologists and social psychologists have suggested diverse lists of basic needs. The first and most famous one still is the Maslow pyramid, and the most contemporary and current one that I feel attached to is Manfred Max Neef's, the so-called barefoot economist from Chile. His list, and he very intelligently distinguishes strategies to fulfill basic needs and basic needs. And basic needs would be kind of water and food and shelter and security and relationship and touch and sexuality and these kind of things, and community and maybe spirituality. And the strategies, they are our tools. Money can be a tool, but doesn't have to be a tool. Power can be a tool, but doesn't have to. Competition or excellence, maybe education, may be a tool, but doesn't have to be tools. And I feel very much attached to these distinctions. And the point is that the basic needs are not similar, but are identical all over the world, because they are expression of our species. They are human nature. Of course, you can question one or another list, but my experience, because I'm asking people all over the world now, which are your, and the answers are not similar; they're identical. Once you have time enough to really sink deep onto the bottom of that question, and what you really need and what you really need most, and then all people meet on the same place.
So you would say that there would be some cultural variation, but the fact that there are basic needs will be universal, or that there are also very specific needs that would be under the category of like universal needs?
Yeah, at least as for the human species, I would say, yes.
Okay. And just maybe last question about that before we continue further with what you said. is there within this category of universal basic needs, are they ranked in your way of thinking in a certain hierarchical way, or they are just laying out there and each person kind of grapple with what is important for them? Or would you say they're just like, without any of them, life cannot be fulfilled, or there's some pathologies that will come, or etc.? Or how do you?
Yeah, quite clearly the latter. There's a nice example. We have scientific evidence from natural sciences that if people are unable to maintain relationships, they prefer to die than to take food or to drink, because it's so essential to maintain relationships. It's a clear proof of the latter.
Yeah, I recently came across, and there's an evolutionary biologist called Brett Feinstein, who introduced the notion that because human beings are social animal, that belonging kind of sits underneath safety, because if you're alone, you're not safe. So in order to be safe, you need to belong to a certain structure. So and he brought that in the context of our strong reaction when we feel that we're going to be ostracized from a group. So kind of dynamics of social media and cancel culture and stuff like that. What happens when you express something that is against your in-group, and why people are having such severe reaction that they would turn off their principle just to belong where they feel belonging.
A friend of mine has committed suicide because he was ostracized, he was outcrowded, and he was cancelled. That is maybe the saddest proof that can one experience.
I don't know if you want to share a bit more about that, or it's...
It would kind of turn this conversation maybe somewhere else, but it's a very clear example and evidence that people need to belong to a community, and that I would frame it as flourishing or thriving relationships is the essence of human being. And another natural neurobiologist, Joachim Bauer, he investigated that thriving relationships are our strongest motivation. This is interesting for economists who think about efficiency. Our strongest motivation and our most reliable pathway to happiness. So this is maybe interesting for philosophers. They both should listen to neurobiologists and their insights on the importance of interbeing, of human relationships and flourishing communities.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there is a certain assumption then that, and that's something that I've been exposed recently to, this question of like, what do I value more, happiness or meaning? And what is the relation between these two things? And does necessarily happiness always mean having a meaningful experience? And does meaningful experience always end up in happiness? And what's the tension there? But yeah. So, but maybe you continue, because I kind of took us a bit sidetracked. So you said, and maybe another little question. You said, okay, so maybe we should consider what is the function of economy, and if it's there to support our basic needs, therefore
Exactly, yeah. This is the first definition. What is economy? You won't find it that precisely in textbooks of economics. From there, what is the purpose? What is the goal of economic activities? And very quickly, if you define the economy and look at its broader contexts, like democratic states, ideally, cultures with their values, from social cohesion to human dignity to peace, maybe, and especially the ecological environment, and ask again, and now what's the purpose of economic activities? And from there we come to the conclusion that the overarching objective and goal of economic activities should be the common good, as simple as that. And although it's almost too simple to be spoken out, it's a kind of revolution in nowadays economic science and education, because what most students in business schools and economic faculties and also in high schools learn is that the economy is about making money or profit or return on investments. And this is a different story. And I think to bring more clarity, which is the story that we want to opt for, is worth dedicating your life and and discussing these different stories.
So it seemed for me like that the major shift is just by first claiming that economy should be in servant of basic needs. That's the first shift that you're doing in your thinking. And what is the argumentation for that just fundamental shift? Because that could be like still be to some extent a belief that through economical means we could serve these needs, but maybe there are other ways of addressing needs like that are not maybe governed under that premise. But maybe I'm also like picking up on details that are not that.
Let's try. The message is, or the proposal is that the economy should be about the common good. And what is the common good? The common good is to make now a quick proposal, although our own suggestion is that there should be a participatory democratic process to define the common good. But to start with a quick intro, it would be a combination of the satisfaction of basic needs, the respect of fundamental values. Which values? Constitutional values, from human dignity to solidarity to justice to sustainability to democracy. And nowadays, as a third one, I would add fundamental rights. And if these three basic needs, democratic values and fundamental rights, they are kind of combined, this could be a definition of the common good. And if economic activities are oriented towards a democratically defined common good, then the achievement of the goal, basic needs, basic values, and also the protection of fundamental rights, is by far more likely than if we strove for capital accumulation, profit and return on investments first and foremost, because but that's the choice.
Yeah, okay, but I want to pick on something because I see there okay, you said there is the notion of the common good that is a combination of certain things, that some of them will be maybe based in values, some of them will be based in universal needs, that and as we said that there is some evidence to the universality of them. But then how do you bridge between this very let's say broad space that points to human nature and to values, because values are very much constructed socially, and I have immediately some examples that maybe will not open directly with them, but to how far people can have perspective about what is worth pursuing or what is worth valuing.
Yeah.
And so what do you do with that tension?
Yeah. I just 1 second, I step back to the universality of basic needs, because this is not only anthropology or social psychology or evolutionary biology. This is also law, and we call it the second generation of human rights, which are the social, cultural, and economic human rights. And there, the satisfaction of many of our basic needs is guaranteed, like access to shelter, like drinking water is now a human right since a couple of years, like food and these things. I'm just adding this because it's not just a scientific list of basic needs, it's also an enshrined list of basic rights we call human rights in the second covenant of the United Nations human rights. So just to address the touch between the legal sphere and the basic rights and the basic needs.
So from the constructed reality into what is actually universally there.
And this is an ethical decision, and there we are at the value level, because it's an ethical decision to decide that everybody should have enough food and drinking water and shelter is a fundamental right. It's a value, and it flows out of the basic value of human dignity, which means that every human being should have a good life and should have all of her and his basic needs met. This is one part of human dignity. And now coming directly to the values level, I fully understand your skepticism, and also, but that's why we made a very conscious choice which kind of value sets we are addressing and we are proposing. We didn't create any new value on ourselves. That's very important. We are kind of referencing to two sources of value sets. One is most frequent values of democratic constitutions. So this is something very broadly shared and very reliable. And we only took out of the democratic constitutions that we kind of screened human dignity, the ones I just enumerated, from human dignity to democracy, only these 5. And we are not saying this is the ultimate truth. No, it's today's current state of which are the most broadly shared values towards which we want to orient economic activities. And maybe tomorrow we see it differently and we can change it. And the other source is, as a social psychologist, we call them relational values. And this is a set of values that scientifically proven allow human relationships to flourish, from respect to empathy, to sharing, to caring, to tolerance and cooperation. And this pays into this providing the flourishing of human relationships, because this makes us happy, and this makes us also achieve a lot, because we are very strongly motivated if we experience flourishing relations.
Maybe just kind of a side note, I'm picking and questioning not because I'm a strong advocate for the current economical system, even though there is certain things that I definitely enjoy from how the system is laid out, and there's many things that I don't. I'm doing it just because it helps me to understand more what you mean, and also because I think it's it leads. It can lead for a more enriching conversation. That's the reason, just to
Please go ahead.
yeah. But you said before that we entered into the ethical arena the moment we decided to abide by law, our natural universal needs, into a legal context. And for me, that's something that, for sure, I don't think that there is at the moment there's a worldwide agreement about that, even though there's many, of course, states that agree, but I would say there's still many ideologies out there that would oppose that. And just
Of course,
yeah.
There's no consensus, no
Yeah,
complete
there's no
consensus on anything.
Yeah.
So this is not a surprise.
Of course, but the reason why I bring it up, just to kind of understand a bit the direction. When you talk about the economy of common good, which we just started to explore, and we could go much more in depth into that idea. Are your current motivations is to find a way to replace, or like in your optimistic vision, to replace the current status quo of Western capitalist societies, or is it something that you think that has potential to spread worldwide, or like what do you imagine with that as a vision for yourself with the work you're doing?
Yeah. Pragmatically, I'm a citizen of Austria and of the European Union. So this is a proposal for the European Union.
Okay.
And I don't have the pretension at all to make a recommendation to anyone outside my political home base.
Okay, so it's really a local initiative. Okay, I understand. No, because I think that this is something that for me brings a lot of much more complicated question, because I think like because there is certain things that I see that are already in a way emerge from the current value system that is common, let's say, within European countries, that correlates to the way you think about the economy. And that for me is something that I say, like, yeah, I could see that being adapted in that context, but I could imagine that it could be very difficult to convince. I don't know, I'm just taking maybe an extreme example just for making the point. If you would have to argue with people who are proponent of the Islamic State that economy should serve for human dignity, they would have a completely different value system. And then we are in a much more difficult conversation than within the context which we are living in.
Of course, and we are not trying to convince anyone by principle. We are only talking to people who are interested in talking and who are organizing public events in the European Union. Very intentionally, everything else would be Eurocentristic and post-colonial and incoherent with our approach for human dignity transferred to the collective level is an advocacy for cultural diversity. And from there, we took very deliberately in heritages from South America and indigenous communities, like the philosophy of behaviour, entered into the concept of the economy for the common good in the very concrete proposal that there should be no property of nature at all. Just an example. And the 7 generations principle from North American indigenous communities entered into the common good balance sheet for companies, in the meaning that we do not only look at the very beginning of the supply chain, but we look at the end of the value chain 7 generations ahead, which is a gift from Northern American.
So just to understand, so you're looking at the externalities of the extraction of goods and how they affect 7 generations forward.
Yeah, consequences of all kinds, exactly. Maybe just to name from a third one, national happiness is a concept that has been created in Bhutan. And we are kind of referencing it, showing that we are looking to other cultures, to other regions, what they have already found, what they have already achieved. And just to not create an illusion. But then it happens that we receive invitations because Economy for the Common Good Argentina exists as an association. But because there came an invitation and an interest in Economy for the Common Good Japan is now founded because they found so many commonalities. And maybe I can make one point to take this fear that this is kind of the attempt to convince anyone of anything. The definition of the common good is not something top-down. It's by definition a bottom-up process. So the only thing we propose, and this already could be considered as Eurocentristic, that we propose that in Japan people are invited together and to find and define collectively what they understand by the common good, although the outcome might be different from the outcome of a similar process in Europe.
Okay.
And
could we dive into that? Like, what do you envision as a process of arriving to the definition of common good that we said has to do with universal needs, with human dignity, certain values that we come up with? So what will be the process of getting there in your mind on a practical level? Like, if we would have shifted to that model tomorrow, what will be the first step?
Yeah, the first step is already happening now, because we are a very hands-on, practical, bottom-up movement, which means that we are already doing the first citizen assemblies and citizens involvement processes on the local level. We start really on a local level. One is in a municipality in the south of Spain, Guarroman, in Andalusia, and the other one is in the southwest of Germany, Baden-Württemberg. And they, in one case, they gathered within the municipality the citizens. They were asked what they consider as most relevant components of the common good. And in Baden-Württemberg, it was organized as a kind of citizen assembly, which in our ideal version would be a representative sample of the population according to age and economic status and migration background and sex and other criteria. And they would be invited to define the 10 to 20 most essential components or sub-goals of the common good. the outcome most frequently is a combination of health and happiness and basic needs met and flourishing relationships, trust, social cohesion, just distribution, political participation, stable ecosystems, and peace. And just the fact that the outcome is extremely similar in the most diverse regions on the planet is very promising and makes us very confident that the outcome will be meaningful and reliable and effective from there, because it really expresses people's priorities as for needs, as for values, as for rights. And then when we have the goals, experts would be invited top down this way, but a very interdisciplinary community of scientists would find the measurable indicators. This is meant the following way. Health is a goal, but you can't measure health. So you need indicators that are measurable, and the most frequently used indicator to measure health was, until recently, life expectancy. Now has come a new indicator, because science is also evolving, and now it's healthy years of life is the new indicator. And once we have these 10 to 20 goals, and once we have found the indicators thanks to which we measure the achievement of these goals, we can aggregate the common, we call this common good product, I didn't say that yet. We can measure it and aggregate it into one single number. Still, we can look at each individual goal and its progress. But this single number of the common good product, which is not a monetary term, it's just a percentage or a number, this can replace gross domestic product, GDP. And just to check back, if you ask who decided on GDP, who was involved in the creation of GDP, I think it's at least a less bad version to compose democratically a common good product and to make it the overarching goal of economic policy than to commission someone to create GDP and then to orient the political economy and the whole economy towards the growth of GDP. It's very clear to me the worst option, and it was never voted upon democratically. The only direct voting that I'm aware of is a question in Germany through the Ministry of Environment, and they asked the population, a representative sample, would you prefer to go on with GDP and its growth, or would you prefer to shift to an alternative which measures the good life of all, like, for instance, the gross national happiness of Bhutan? And only 18% of the population voted for the continuation with GDP, whereas almost 70% of the population preferred to shift towards a kind of a common good product. And this is very telling. And in a well-working democracy, we would not wait a single day to shift from this worse option to the better option.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm still a little bit struggling to understand, even though you gave the example of this commonality, that how the product of the common good arrives to be something that is similar between different communities. It feels for me that when I kind of walk around the world and I see people and I see how our society is structured, that the current values of the society are also to some extent attached to the economic models. When you think about what we value, and then there is a certain kind of if you want to change the values, you need to change the economy. But if you need to change the economy, you also need to change, to some extent, the values. In the sense that many people, on a practical level, are very excited about the accumulation of stuff, no? And we value. We put a lot of value. We connect personal value to commodities. So, like, what you own is, like, what kind of product you have defines who you are. So how can we shift the conversation while the system is still operating, in order to that when we kind of define at the end of the day what is happiness, because that's still a very general term, or maybe. So then, how do we go about that tension?
Well, I think this was actually the way on which I became aware of the system error. I compared economics textbooks and the values that are propagated in them with the values that are enshrined in our constitutions. Because one of the great confusions that I see is that there is seemingly a plurality of values, an ethical plurality, which makes any political decision almost impossible. So where do we stick to? Where do we orient our decisions? And my proposal is, let's take the constitutions, because these are the broadest agreed upon democratic decisions that we have, and it's not economic textbooks. Why I'm saying this? Because if you look at constitutions, the long-lasting values that we find in them is human dignity and solidarity. I'm repeating myself. Social justice, sustainability is now coming ever stronger. This is maybe a little bit newer. Democracy and peace. It's very important. There's no single constitution that propagates war as a value. Although there are some people in society that prefer war to peace. I'm not discussing this. That's why where's our orientation? If some vote for war and others for peace, well, let's look at constitutions. And same with the economy, because if we now look at economics textbooks, what we find in there is utmostly surprising, because we find the 5 core values of economics textbooks is individual utility maximization, competition orientation, the pursuit of financial goals first and foremost, consumerism or materialism, and unlimited growth. And these 5 leading principles, ethical principles of economics textbooks, are not even ethical values. They're pseudo values, because none of them exists in one single democratic constitution. And this actually was the eye-opening and mind-blowing contradiction that I discovered when I investigated what's wrong about our economy. Well, we are teaching values in economic education, and we are propagating values in economic science that contradict fundamentally our democratic basic values. And this is the great confusion in the economic debate.
Okay, so one kind of maybe meta question that I think maybe is worth exploring. Human beings has a certain tribal instinct, let's say, like where we and throughout history, different societies competed with one another, sometimes on resources, sometimes out of ideological reasons, etc. And I'm trying to kind of think a little bit how maybe what is the relation between those economical principles and, let's say, maybe peace as a starting point. If we are playing this game, that we are different countries that decides independently what economical models they should pursue for whatever reasons and whatever values that we have, because as you said, like, we are not trying to convince anybody, we are inviting people who are curious to join the conversation. And if we adopt a certain system that, let's say, value happiness above economical growth, and let's look, for example, at Bhutan. Would a country like Bhutan be able to prevent somebody who is a bad faith player in an international game to maintain its independence of its own values, or would it be just be swallowed by any superpower who would value growth, power, So then, what do you do when you? Because what I feel in that I think that there is a certain communication challenge that is inherited to those ideas, in the sense that as long we just need one bad faith player to exploit the fact that we are not all aiming to be as strong and financially as we can, because financial strength also translates into, let's say, better technology, better military capacity, and the ability to sustain the boundaries of the culture.
Yes.
So how do you think about those things? And I know that there's a lot of bias in that from where I'm coming from, yes, and from being Israeli and Jewish, and what that baggage brings. So I'm kind of interested to see, how do you look at it?
Same in Austria. Bhutan, Israel and Austria are small countries, and in economic terms, most economists would say they should be as open as possible. They should communicate in economic terms as much as possible with the whole world for their benefit and their welfare. Said that communication of one country to other countries in economic terms is trade. And if a country that chooses a different pathway, like putting national happiness over GDP growth or technological innovations, is completely open, then it's lost, because it will be swept away by the superpowers. But the precondition for being swept away is free trade, and there is no obligation to practice free trade. You can also practice free trade with your friends, and not free trade with economic superpower or technological superpowers or dictatorships. That's a choice.
But why would that be the mechanism that will, why would that be the parameter that indicates you being swept away if you're open or not?
Because then the transnational corporations would have the same rights in Bhutan as the small and medium-sized companies in Bhutan, and they would just sweep them away. And
economically.
But
what about things like national security?
Or technologically, they would introduce new technologies that become first more attractive to, let's say, 5% of population of Bhutan. But if 5% start, then another 5% join, and after 10 years, the infrastructure has changed in the country. And there is a true story on that. And Bhutan has not only the gross national happiness, which is a questionnaire of 133 questions on all relevant dimensions of daily life, actually. It's very, very real life oriented questionnaire, from how many days, how many times a day do you have time to pray or to meditate? It's one question. How is your relationship to your neighbors is another question. Can you have a swim in the river without the health risk is one of. So these are great questions. And they don't only have this gross national happiness, they also have apply a screening tool for upcoming political decisions of the parliament of Bhutan. What would be their impact on the national happiness, on these 133 qualities and sub-goals? And they had to decide if they want to join the World Trade Organization, which is a free trade organization. Then there would have been no discrimination possible between transnational corporations and the regional economy of Bhutan. And the first reflex of the cabinet of 26 ministers was, yeah, of course we join the free trade organization, because free trade brings growth and wealth and more democracy, as we see with China, and peace and only good things. But then they said, hold on for a moment, we have our screening tool. Let's check it scientifically and let's prove what would be the consequences on biodiversity, on cultural diversity, and on social cohesion, on income inequality, and so on and so forth. And they checked one by one, and they thought, well, actually it would we would start destroying our ecosystems, and the society would be torn apart because inequality would rise, and so on and so forth. And in the end, the decision was clearly with 2/3 against the entry of Bhutan into the World Trade Organization. And that's why they, until today, are free of free trade. And this is a different option. And in our thinking, this option doesn't exist, because our thinking is we do live in a globalized world, economically speaking. Of course, we live in a globalized world as for As for consciousness and media and cultural activities, but we do not necessarily live in a globalized world in economic terms. This should be a political choice.
No, this I totally get. I think that I just have a bit of a different instinct, and maybe again it also really relates to the time, the specificity of the time that we are talking right now, that has to do with there's this cliche of a sentence: it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And maybe that's kind of like what motivates many people to engage in something like martial art, etc. And I think that, and that's something that for me is a little bit maybe where I see maybe some lack of consideration, or maybe it's just the way I interpret the things that you're saying, because it can definitely be part of the discussion of the common good, obviously from what you've presented. But that when we think about these kind of better visions for the future, I think that one thing that I see common with many, let's say, utopian thinkers, or that there is a certain lack of grappling with the most dark aspect of human beings. Okay. And maybe that's not the way you think about it, but and for me, like, when I think about if peace is in my value, I want to be as well a master of war. Not because I want war, because I want to understand what I want to avoid, and I want to be able I want to be able to have the tools to avoid what I don't want to experience. And in that regard, I think like I can take this very simple principle from me teaching my son how to protect himself if somebody is bullying him. Yes. And we can extrapolate from that to how does a collective of people, what is the action and sacrifices that a collective of people need to do in order to maintain their values. And I think that in that regard, there is a certain sacrifice that is unpleasant. And again, like if I think about, and I'll just give the example of my son to be like in the most real and how it affects experience. So my son is a little small to its age, and in the school where he's going, it's a very friendly school, and there's not so much bullying happen. But there's one kid that sometimes just kind of push him around, and he feels a bit intimidated by him. So in the process of kind of like talking about what is going on, okay, he started to go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu course, and then we play together. And sometimes I see that, like, in order for him to grow confident into that space that he can protect himself, he really needs to sacrifice a certain openness, a certain softness that would be much nicer to be as the status quo of his being. Yeah. And as his father, I feel like, wow, like I'm pushing him to sacrifice something that is so nice about, like, just to be open and to be soft and not to be aggressive. But at the other hand, if he doesn't do that sacrifice, then later he will find himself in a situation that he cannot feel safe again. And then if I'm just throwing that into like a really large international politics, then I think, like, what prevents Bhutan from being completely being obliterated by a multi-force like China, unless there is some other forces that are balancing it? And in that regard, now Europe is kind of placed as maybe I'm wrong about that, but as far as I'm aware, it's still what we would define as strong economy, with the ability to generate technologies and build armies, etc., to maintain its borders. But if you let go of those things, you might end up with losing those capacities, and that's something that. And again, I was born in Israel, a place that is constantly in that kind of tension. So this is the reason why these thoughts are very. There's always a side in my mind, like, okay, but who wants to do harm to you? And maybe you are free from those thoughts. I don't know.
If you enjoyed the conversation so far and found it meaningful, please consider to share the episode with others and to click the like button. These small actions might seem meaningless, but they are the fuel that helps the podcast project to move forward. Your attention and time is highly valued, and we would love to hear more about the insights you might have from listening to this episode. And please consider to subscribe to the channel to be notified for all future uploads.
Yeah, I think I get you.
Yeah.
And, let me try to give
of course.
an answer or
To think together.
a wish. Let's try to think together. Exactly. Well, first of all, I fully support that it's healthy and it's good to nourish the self-confidence, not in the meaning that I'm stronger than my age fellows, but I'm able to defend myself in case something happens. So I totally enjoyed boxing training, for instance, but not in order to aggress someone or attack one, but in order to have a stronger self-confidence and feeling of security. And second, if my age fellow approached with a knife or a gun, then I will not try to box this person. I will call the police. And what I'm saying with this, in the nation state, what we did is that we renounce of the rule of the jungle, and we delegate the so-called power monopoly to the state.
Monopoly of violence to the police.
Exactly, yeah. And I think it has its downside and its shortcomings, but it's the less bad version than the rule of the jungle.
No doubt.
And the third step is same between nations. And this is the vision of the United Nations. Nations should, and it's a vision. It's a vision of eternal peace. And today, some countries are still going to war and still assaulting their neighbors or smaller countries, and that's still happening. But the law, I think we should talk about and cultivate the long-term vision and become ever more skilled in agreeing upon the final vision. And the final vision is quite clear to me. There is no national army any longer, and there is only a UN army, and the UN army is only big enough to prevent that in the biggest country a rearming process is being organized, because the UN would still be stronger and prevent that, the re-weaponizing of any country. Of course, this is the final point, and how do we get there? And now I could propose a couple of things, but maybe the most important thing is to share this vision, to share the vision that one day there will be no country with an army, and because there will be a power monopoly and a monopoly of exercising violence just in the worst case and on decision of a democratic Security Council, not of a hegemonic security with veto powers, but of a democratic Security Council, to prevent any kind of aggression, war attack, or systemic violation of human rights, which is already actually in the Charter of the United Nations. Theoretically, if a government committed strong violations of human rights in a country, United Nations Armed Force could intervene, and they do from time to time. Just with the current Security Council, the whole UN system is quite flawed and doesn't work in many cases. I'm not denying that. That's why I insist on talking. Do we share the vision? That's the starting point. If once we share that, I think we can define one step after the other how we can get closer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the only, let's say, kind of the conservative instinct I have in that conversation. Conservative in the sense of like just being skeptic about changing the status quo to avoid unknown future catastrophe. So I do have this conservative instinct around that, because to me it is not clear if violence and waging war and the wish to dominate others and the wish to destroy others is not also part of human nature.
Oh, that's interesting.
And for me,
let's talk about this.
You know, so for me, it's something that, like, I feel like that it's that to some extent, my question would, from my perspective, my question would be not how can we overcome that and rid ourselves from these bad traits, because I would be very skeptical about it. I would ask, how do we govern them that they don't manifest in the worst possible way? And I think that what I hear from you is that you kind of propose to talk about the tension between bottom-up things and democratization, but on the other hand, to have a certain top-down procedure or bodies that can govern that. Because at the end, like as you said, if we want to prevent one hypothetical country from ever rebuilding an army, we do need to have somebody needs to sit at the top and have the power to do that. And then how to prevent that power from being corrupted. And then we are again in this kind of question that for me are very much related to that's why I say like the dark side of human nature, that power is toxic, power is like tempting, and then like that goes into a very complicated conversation. And maybe maybe it's beyond what you feel your expertise to talk, but I'm just curious because I find you a very interesting person to speak to, so
yeah,
I bring it.
Maybe just on this, what is human nature, because this then we don't need to go to estimations what might happen, but there are some insights on human nature that I would like to share. And we have scientific proof, and of course it's just state of the art of science today, and maybe it will change again. But we started from a scientific state of status quo, where Sigmund Freud said there is an instinct to kill others, or at least an instinct to death, Todestrieb in German. And today we know that there isn't. At least this gene hasn't been found. Okay. But what has been found are the mirror neurons. Mirror neurons, which allow us by nature to feel with one another. That's scientifically proven. So if I don't protect myself against feeling with you, I can feel your feelings. And
second, if I don't protect myself
against feeling what you are feeling, so if I don't shut down my emotional perception,
then I can feel you.
Exactly, and all your feelings. So I'm able to take part in your sadness and in your fear and in your joy and happiness and in your anger. I'm able to, without making any training. So this is nature. Yeah. And this is one insight, and I think this is very promising, and it's by chance saying what Adam Smith, the forefather of the national economy, meant with sympathy. He was very much writing about sympathy, and he meant the ability to feel with other living beings. And I'm saying this because Adam Smith is often referenced as someone who is advocating egoism. And I denied it. I read both of his books, The Wealth of Nations and The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And you see already the title, The Theory of Moral Sentiments. Wow, what's that? What are moral sentiments? And he wrote about universal benevolence. That's a moral sentiment. And he wrote literally, a healthy human being would not rest until she or he knows that another feeling being, he's writing literally, another feeling being is fine in the most remote corner of the universe. He had a very empathetic language, but so this is not about competition. This is not about utilities. This is not about violence. This is not about killing. This is about empathy and sympathy, which leads to collaboration, which leads to respect, which leads to sharing, which leads to the care economy. And I think it's an ideology to tell us that we are egoistic and competitive and violent, and we strive for power, and we will go to war as long as humans exist. I think that's an ideology because it's not proven scientifically. And the fact that it's an extremely repetitive cultural pattern, an extremely strong experienced cultural habit, does not say that it's part of human nature. It says that some who want us to be like that, they impose themselves over humans that are more humane, and that. But
then, if we kind of we start to reverse, we go in a time machine backwards, and we start going into our evolutionary past. we will find the first person that killed another person.
Yes.
No? And then we will ask ourselves, like, what was that?
Yes.
And for me, it's not
I
clear
would say
what
it was a choice.
Hmm?
I would say it was a choice.
It was a choice. Yes, of course. I wouldn't claim that it's like that there's no agency, but I would ask, like, what was the driving mechanism that led to that choice, and whether those mechanisms are avoidable by design, or whether they are consequential by nature.
Yeah. Now comes a very important distinctions. Yeah. We are very free beings, which means we our genome and our genes allow us to be rude and reckless and greedy and hurt one another and kill one another and go to war. They allow us all this, but they don't oblige us to do that. That's at least the state of art of interdisciplinary science that I'm aware of, and that's great news, because we can do all that, but we don't have to do any of that. So it's a choice. And if we come together and think about ourselves and make the rules of living together, then we can say, okay, we have these dark sides and we are able to extinct our species. Maybe we'll do it. But we also have the choice to favor and to give priority to ethical values, which are relational values and nowadays constitutional values. And of course, we will not fulfill these values every day, and we will not be able to live up with these values every day. But at least we have a guiding star, and at least we have social norms and rules that help us to avoid killing each other and to...
No, I'm totally with you, and I don't deny that there's a lot of cultural factors, like, if you compare, I don't know, Tibetan culture or like the Jains in India, that they are maybe the least violent culture that has ever been developed in...
Someone said, has there ever been a Buddhist war? And others said there have more than 1,000 Christian wars so far in history.
Yeah.
What does it tell us about human nature?
Yeah, of course. I think that, again, like, you can seek evidence for cultures who advocate not harming insects, like the Jains. So, of course, there are strong cultural factors, but that's why it brings me down into coordination problem. That, again, and kind of to game theory. That the moment you have one bad faith actor, then the rules are different, because you cannot rely on the benevolent intention of the other players, but you have to be suspicious, because you say, okay, but what if other person is not willing to play, because in the current status there are bad ideologies, there are people who think in a way that
and I think there always will be. That's what I'm convinced about. There will always be in the crowd of the many. Yeah. There will always be some who try to be violent and who try to trick and who go to war. But that's why the foul players, they have to be sanctioned by the fair players. That's the learning of game theory. The foul players only have an advantage if they're not sanctioned by the fair players, and this should be the rule set for the economy, benefiting fair players, the sustainable and responsible ones, and sanction the foul players, those who violate human rights and exploit humans and destroy the environment. And same for the international community. That's also coming back to United Nations. The idea is, if one country went to war against another, like the United States in 2003 against Iraq, then actually the international community should sanction the United States and the 13 members of European Peace Project who joined the United States to go to war against Iraq. But of course, as long as France and the United States and others have a veto right in the Security Council, the United Nations cannot even take that decision.
It's not really...
because it's not completed.
It's definitely just, at the moment, the way it's structured is kind of representing democracy rather than being really democratic. It just brings me, because we bring this topic of coordination, and it also leads me there are two things I want to speak to, and we are already kind of deep into our conversation. So let's see. And one is like, I think that, and I wonder, how do you make sense of it in your own personal life? Because I feel like that when we talk about consensus or coming to agreement, I feel like that at the moment, the way our informational landscape is operating and the way people consume content in pursuit of this meta question of what is true, what is happening, is that we are ending up in more and more isolated bubbles of echo chambers. And I think one good example of it was maybe COVID. That was really clear because it was like a international topic, and we really clearly saw how like different people have different ways of thinking about things, and completely losing the ability to converse with people from the other side, so to speak. And also I think, and without opening too much the topic of COVID specifically, but do you also experience it around your work that when we talk about political topics, there is more and more polarization due to and I would say like there's a lot of research that already implicates the attention based economical model of social medias and how it prevents us from coming to a consensus, but actually exacerbated the problem of polarity. How do you experience it in your own universe, and do you have any thoughts about that?
Many thoughts about that, of course. Yeah. For the moment being, I would prefer not having social media than having social media, because they're doing more harm than they are creating benefit. But of course, I'm not advocating the abolition of social media. That would not be the solution, of course. Maybe starting with polarization, because I think that's a very interesting phenomenon, which did not show up with social media, which was there before. My favorite example is everybody who criticized capitalism was automatically and as kind of a reflex called a socialist, as if there existed only capitalism, something really bad. But if the only alternative to something really bad is something even worse, socialism or communism, then unfortunately we have to keep the quite bad thing, capitalism, because there is no alternative. Yeah. This is polarization, which means we are reducing public discourse to two opposite extremes, which are actually, if you take a closer look, equally nonsensical, because we're making invisible all the shades in between, and there is an infinite number of shades and alternatives in between. And there is a social market economy, there is a solidary market economy, there is a ecological, solidary, social market economy, there's a common good economy, then there is maybe a world made up only out of commons and cooperatives, and then there is socialism. So there's a full spectrum of alternatives. And what happens if everybody who has a deviating opinion from the dominant official narrative is made invisible, then you can keep in power with one extreme. Which, but so what is important to maintain a highly plural and diverse discourse, ideal in the mainstream media. But what I experienced in the COVID pandemic, and then in the Ukraine war, and now also with the conflict between Israel and Palestine, there is just one official narrative, and everybody who is kind of doubting or questioning or thinking about a third alternative is accused of being something really unattractive. For instance, if someone is just questioning and doubting the delivery of weapons to Ukraine, is automatically a thick friend of Putin. This is just not the only alternative. No? There are grades and shades in between. And this is being made invisible, and this is polarization. And I see this not only as a phenomenon of social media, I see this as a phenomenon in mainstream media, I see it as a war strategy in the public discourse. And public discourse has declined in its quality in at least two two dimensions. One is that the plurality has gone lost. And the second is respect has gone lost. We're not inviting a different opinion. We're not listening to a different opinion. We are kind of tagging and blaming and shaming any other opinion. And this makes me quite pessimistic. And of course, there I would have solutions.
You also had like a bit of a personal experience around these things, no? Of like being how did you experience that kind of being thrown into a horrible bucket due to your opinion in any political context?
Yes, I did in the COVID-19 pandemic, and I experienced my personal common good trauma experience. What do I mean by that? And I want to say that I'm self-reflective with my common good proposal, because it can be abused by totalitarian agents from all walks of life, by socialist totalitarian agents or governments, and also by fascist. And it has happened, and I'm aware of this, that both the Nazis worked with the common good, kind of, and also the socialists did. But what is the conclusion? The conclusion is not to dismiss the common good, but to not allow that it is abused. And in the pandemic, it happened again. It happened again that someone said, this is the common good, and everybody has to rally around this common good. And every deviating opinion, perspective, experience, or even scientific evidence was just dismissed, was either fact-checked or cancelled, scapegoated. And this was a discourse war. It was a discourse war, and of course a discourse war has kind of victims.
More a narrative war than a discourse war, because there was no discourse.
There was, exactly, yeah. It was a battlefield, and not everybody was even allowed to fight. Yeah.
I mean, that's something that, you know, I wrote once on social media, which is, again, maybe the worst place to try to communicate with people. But I wrote something like the being radical nowadays in the current in our current discourse is to look for the middle, to look for the center. That's being radical nowadays, because it's so easily to be pulled to the side. And for me, that's something that I find. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love the format of long format podcasting, because it really enables me to have some dialogue in somebody and to just show, look, a dialogue between opposing perspective is possible. But I find it like really like an uphill battle, so to speak, and that's something that really makes me worried about, you know. And I would even not necessarily go to like huge topics like COVID or like the war in Ukraine. I would even go into places of like, there was a conference called the Future of Contact Improvisation. Uh-huh. And in that conference, there was a bunch of organizers that chose to frame it in that language. And they already embedded their own values into that conference. And it was obvious that you wouldn't be able to come with any opinion and have a dialogue, but that you should have certain alignment with certain values. And so I think it happens everywhere. And I find it like very, very troubling and challenging to how to keep having optimism around that when the signs out there about the collapse of public discourse are so overwhelmingly evident.
Maybe remembering what are the values that allowed us to talk to one another, to listen to one another. Maybe I give you one analogy from dance to democracy. One thought that I had on the way here is that dancers need to listen to the other body. And when the listening stops, the dance ends, because you cannot dance with somebody without listening to the other's body. You could theoretically then dance against another body, but that's not possible. And this is what society could learn from dancers. Never stop listening to one another, never stop feeling the other body, and maintain the relationship, maintain the conversation. Don't blame the other, don't dismiss a different opinion, keep listening. And then I'd like to give this example of the pandemic. This polarisation. What was the polarisation? The polarisation is the lockdown narrative. We need the lockdowns because otherwise many people would die. And everybody who had a different opinion was automatically named a COVID denier. No? And there we had these poems.
COVID denier was good. You could also be named like a murderer.
in a worst case, yeah. Or a conspiracy theorist or whatever. And if you take a closer look, these are two opposed extremes against, same as capitalism and socialism. And I tried to translate it into political measures. The lockdown narrative included 25 violation of human rights, or violation of 25 human rights. It hasn't happened since World War II. Yeah. And a more moderate version could have been, of course, we acknowledge COVID-19. We acknowledge it's a pandemic, and we make laws to manage the crisis, but without restricting fundamental rights. So binding measures of the government and of the parliament, but without. Another one would be, of course, we do recommendations, like Sweden did most overwhelmingly. We recommend to keep distance, we recommend to wear a mask, we recommend to take the vaccine, we recommend to be cautious with one another, but it's not even binding. Yeah. And the other extreme is we don't do anything because we don't believe that this is a pandemic. And these are the extremes, restricting 25 fundamental rights, and the solutions in between are much more convincing, and they are obvious if you allow them to be discussed.
Maybe just one thought back to you, and that's something I share a lot with students whenever I teach partnering, that I think that one thing that really differs between communicating in dance and communicating verbally is that when we communicate verbally, we have to take roles. So if I want to listen, I have to stop talking. But when we dance, listening and talking can coexist simultaneously. And I think that it's less threatening to listen when you dance, because it doesn't indicate that you cannot express yourself at the same time. I can move my own body and at the same time listen and be curious. So I think that in dance, there's a certain blurriness of these clear boundaries between the act of listening and the act of talking, that when I see, I mean, now again, like my media attention in the last 6 months was heavily leaned towards what is happening in my country. And I found myself once in a while watching one of those, Piers Morgan on YouTube, this kind of talk show debates. And then, or I watched some actually interesting debate between two historians, Norm Finkelstein and Benny Morris, talking about kind of the whole history of the conflict. But you see that when people really have strong opposing ideas, when you speak, it's threatening my ability to speak. And then, it becomes so tiring to even listen to such a conversation, because there's just an attempt to take space. And it's like an expansionist act rather than an inclusive act. And I think that's something that definitely is special to the act of sharing a dance.
I fully agree, and I think this is a healing effect of contact improvisation or other kinds of dance for humanity. This is why dance is universal. There is no culture without dance. Maybe the styles are different, but the fact that we dance is universal. And from the experience of contact improvisation, I made one day the sentence: if every human being had the opportunity to dance contact once a month, we would already have eternal peace on this planet.
You think so?
No, I don't. But the thought came.
The thought came. Okay. No, I thought you were like saying that
it would be a proxy of eternal war, not a reality.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, like there will be like some evidence to. I don't know if. Well, it's an interesting direction. I think that for me, I see a lot of competition within the contact improvisation world, and a lot of power struggles, and a lot of things that I would say that they are reflection of the broader society, even though there's a lot of very specific traits that are very unique to the contact culture. But it's also interesting that, another thing that is universal is wrestling.
Yes.
And so dance is definitely universal, and every culture have developed some form of competitive physical play, and that's also like, you know, evident in the natural world. I mean, I don't know how many species of animals are dancing, but many animals are also wrestling.
Original play. There is no mammal without play, and play from time to time turns into fight, but it's a peaceful fight. The goal is not neither to hurt the other nor to kill the other, let alone.
Or you have the form of ritual fighting, where, for example, when two snakes want to indicate who is going to be the one that will be able to further his gene, so they will fight one another, but without killing one another, knowing that the way we fight is just to check who is more capable and the other one goes away, but we are not going to use our lethal ability to destroy each other. And I think that's something that you know, maybe sport is some kind of a human expression of that kind of quality.
I think so. Original play is really a good term, and maybe I ask back to you. There are ritualized martial arts where the goal is to find out who is the more skilled and the more capable, but may a different goal of, let's say, play fight be to be touched, and to touched in a very deep way, because it's a question. In our culture, we are kind of very reserved and distant, and from time to time we dance. And if we fight, there is the risk that we are hurt or even killed, injured or killed. And play fight is a kind of strong and deep touch, which might also be painful. But it's could it be a longing for intense contact and deep touch that doesn't kill you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I personally practice in the last 8 years Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I find tremendous amount of parallels between that and contact improvisation on a physical level of what you actually what is the type of awareness that you're trying to expand through the practice. And for me, it has been a journey of embracing, let's say, the warrior archetype without becoming violent, or like recognizing within the practice what needs to happen for me internally to move from playing into fighting, which is totally different. Like, and in the combination of play fight, for me, I mean, in the term, for me, like, again, like there is something contradictory in the term, because play is always voluntarily. The moment I force you, we are not playing. And fighting someone is always a non-voluntary action. And there is a certain dichotomy that maybe that's the grapple within the bringing those words together, like how to break this dichotomy. But I do find it like very as a great way to express physical aggression without labeling it violence, because that's, I think, something that is also like very often being coupled. You know, like if you know, it happens, like, for example, in Contact Festival, if you suddenly see more typically two guys like starting to dance a bit more physically, and that some people feel like, oh, that's very aggressive. And for me, that would be just like, it's more intensive, but it's not necessarily like it doesn't necessarily lead to violence. It can also lead for like a very strong bond. And it happens to me very often when I end up a sparring session, that I feel extremely connected to the person I've just played, because I come with that attitude. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting topic to dwell into. I mean, we didn't touch many things that I do want to touch, so I hope that you will be willing to come again. Because I think I think like one thing that I would have loved to kind of maybe already give some kind of a future preview for our audience is to have.
Maybe I can. Before I stop, I thought of an analogy between dance and economy.
Sure.
A short one is talking about dichotomies. Common good economy initially was also considered a dichotomy, a contradictio intra termini, a contradiction within the term. Today I know it's not. The contradiction is resolved. And maybe if the framework of the fight, what we is a common agreement, is consensual, then maybe this is the dissolution of the seeming democracy. But actually, I wanted to say something different. I want to say the fact that competition is entering the field of contact improvisation, and maybe some want to become superstars of contact teaching, or some want to make a lot of money out of contact. This is contagion from the economic system to contact improvisation. But more interestingly, what could be the learning of the whole society from the contact field? And a very brief summary would be that I see this contact jam and this gathering of contactors as a large and complex cooperation. Not a competition, a cooperation, which goal is the satisfaction of basic needs. The goal is that people become healthier and happier. And it addresses both dimensions: individual development, becoming more characteristic, authentic, unique, and also the collective is appreciated and is developed. We start the whole ceremony, the whole ritual with an opening circle, and we close it with a closing circle. And now the analogy, if markets, or better said, the economy, were organized in a similar way, then we would start a marketplace with all participants sitting in an opening circle and saying, hey, we want to practice the economy in a collaborative way. And we want, we agree on the goal of satisfying the basic needs of everybody involved, and to get out healthier and happier from this collective activity. And this would be the mindset, but also the values. No? It's an ethical attitude with which we could organize the economy, we could organize markets, and I think this is a potential learning of business world from the contact improvisation.
I mean, this is definitely what I wanted to point out as a preview, that I think that the next conversation we should have was really to dig into what is happening in a jam and what is the learning that could happen from there. And what you just mentioned reminds me of a French movie called The Green and Beautiful. I don't know if you've seen this movie. It's kind of a futuristic utopian movie that there is like a parallel universes, and there is Earth, but there's other universes in which human exist, and in one of them there is like a post-war society that whenever they gather for economical means, it just starts with like sitting together and having a discussion. But in that conversation, I think what we should also talk is like, what is competition? And I saw you brought a book that maybe will be the next book I should read, No Context, The Case Against Competition. Because that's something that for me, you know, like one of my childhood hero is Michael Jordan.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've seen the Netflix series about him called The Last Dance, which is 10 episodes about the last season that the Chicago Bulls played with the legendary Phil Jackson and the team of Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Phil Jackson, the coach, called the last season The Last Dance. So, and Michael Jordan for me is a character that kind of embodies competitive spirit in a way that is showing the beauty of it, but also the price of it, and but that's a kind of a larger topic to include. Episode 2. Hey, thank you very much. Maybe before we finish, if you want to share with the audience where they could kind of get in touch with you, or like what ways they can connect to your work, maybe some reading recommendation from the things you wrote that you want to share with people.
Sure. Format. Well, there are 17 books. You will find them. There is a personal website you will find. There is the Economy for the Common Good movement in so far 15 countries. You will find it, Economy for the Common Good. And for those who are based in Vienna and Austria, there is the Cooperative for the Common Good, the Gemeinwohl-Genossenschaft, and which is offering a common good current account. So you can have a peaceful mind with your euros in the bank. I think these are the most important.
Cool. So I will put everything in the show notes for our listener, and Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. It was a great pleasure. Yeah.
If you want to see more precious and insightful moments, make sure to check our short clips playlist. To see longer interviews, check out the full episode playlist just below it. And to be notified for all future videos, click the subscribe button and don't forget to hit the notification bell. See you on the next episode.